Hi, I'm Michelle. My sister cut my hair while I was asleep, just hours before her wedding. Not because I hurt her, not because I made a scene, just because she thought I might look better than her. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was watching my own parents defend her, watching them serve me drugged tea. And when I showed up anyway, with the truth, everyone froze. Why is it, in some families, the person who finally speaks up becomes the villain? Do you want to know what they did next? I arrived 15 minutes early. Never fashionable, but safe. The venue was a converted church downtown, with polished wooden floors and an overuse of dusty rose florals. I parked behind a string of Audis and Range Rovers, none of which belonged to me. My rental was silver, scratched, and unimpressed by wealth. Inside, the air was laced with champagne and expectation. Strings of fairy lights looped overhead like halos waiting to fall. I walked slowly, not because of nerves, but because something in my gut told me to watch before I stepped. Near the entrance stood the seating chart, mounted on an easel, embossed, organized alphabetically. I scanned the rows once, then again. No Michelle. Maybe they forgot, or maybe I was never officially invited. I spotted my mother by the corner bar, a glass already in her hand. I moved toward her, but before I could open my mouth, a wedding planner with a headset intercepted me. "Hi! Are you with the Gregson party?" "I'm the bride's sister." She flipped through her tablet, eyes darting. "I have Vera Gregson's bridal party list. I don't see a Michelle. Are you a guest?" Before I could answer, Vera appeared. She glided over in a pale pink jumpsuit, tan perfectly matched to her heels, her voice syrupy sweet. "It's okay," she said, touching the planner's arm. "She's with family. We kept it simple. Names weren't necessary. Except every other name was printed. Except mine." I smiled like it didn't matter. Took a seat at the furthest table near the coat rack and an unplugged speaker. Nobody looked twice. I'd worn a navy wrap dress, understated but elegant. I'd hoped for neutral. Turns out I'd landed on invisible. They served miniature crab cakes and champagne refills. The photographer drifted by, but didn't pause. I watched as the bridesmaids, Vera's old sorority sisters, clinked glasses in coordinated blush gowns. Mine was supposed to arrive today. At 7:30, I excused myself to the restroom, then made a quiet detour to the back room where the dresses had been delivered. My name had been attached to one. I'd called the boutique myself to confirm, emailed measurements, and paid the deposit. The assistant smiled politely. "Oh, Michelle, right. That dress got swapped yesterday." "Swapped? Your sister said you'd prefer something less flashy." She handed me a garment bag. I unzipped it and stared. It was beige. Not champagne, not ivory, beige. The material was stiff, neckline awkward, and it screamed secondary character. "She didn't even tell me?" The assistant winced. "She said you were good with last-minute changes." I nodded like it made sense, like it didn't claw at something I'd kept buried for years. I took the dress and walked back to the table. On the way, I passed Vera laughing with her maid of honor. She didn't even glance my way. I sat, folded the dress across my lap, and watched. From where I was seated, I couldn't hear the toasts clearly, but I could see the reactions. How people lit up when Vera smiled. How they leaned in when she spoke. No one asked where her sister was. No one remembered I existed in the photo albums unless I was the one holding the camera. "You can't name someone invisible," I muttered under my breath, staring at the blank name card I'd flipped over in front of me. My phone buzzed. "Becca. How's it going?" They forgot my name and changed my dress. But I'm here. Still here. A few seconds passed. "You're stronger than that whole table combined." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that strength meant staying quiet in moments like this, not exploding, not begging for inclusion, just being present, unshaken. But the truth was, I didn't feel strong. I felt erased. I looked around. No one noticed I'd returned. No one noticed I'd left. I picked up a folded napkin, smoothed it out, and placed it beside the name card. For a moment, I imagined my name etched there in gold script. Michelle. Just Michelle. Not the sister, not her. Just me. I stared at the restroom sign next to my table, realizing even the venue knew where to place someone disposable. The table they sat me at was barely a step away from the swinging kitchen door and a laminated sign that read, "Restrooms." Every few minutes, someone bumped my chair on the way in, or I caught the clatter of dishes being scraped into bins. I tried not to flinch when a server shouted, "Behind you!" carrying a tray full of shrimp skewers. Across the room, the rest of the bridal party sat under golden lighting, sipping white wine and passing charcuterie like it was communion. Their laughter flowed freely, interrupted only by Vera's voice, which always seemed to rise a little louder than everyone else's. I adjusted my seat, angling slightly away from the traffic of guests, but there was no escaping the feeling. I wasn't placed here by accident. A young waiter approached me, hesitant. "Ma'am, you sure you're not with catering? These seats were," he glanced down at his notepad, "reserved by the bride herself." I met his eyes and smiled. "No apron, no trays, not catering." He flushed a little and backed away. I caught Vera watching from across the room. She tilted her glass toward me, smirked, and mouthed something I couldn't quite catch. Probably close to the cake. The same excuse she used when she sat me next to the utility closet during her engagement party. It was always dressed as a joke, just a little mix-up, just a seat. But the pattern was impossible to ignore when you looked close enough. And tonight, I was looking closer than ever. I excused myself for a moment, stepped outside for air. My phone buzzed with a call from a client. I answered, leaned against the side of the building, and let the chill wake me up. 5 minutes, tops. When I came back, something felt off. I slid into my chair and reached for my purse beneath it. The zipper was undone. My lipstick and compact mirror were gone. Just those two things. I flagged a passing server. "Did anyone clean this table while I was out?" They glanced at the empty plates. "No, ma'am, we haven't cleared this side yet." "Did anyone stop by here?" A shrug. "It's a party, people move around." I nodded, forced a thank you, and sat back down. My phone buzzed again. Becca this time. "Still okay?" I typed back, "Things are disappearing. Literally." A beat passed. "Want me to come?" I stared at the screen for a long second, then typed, "Not yet. Let's see how far they go." As the night wore on, I kept an eye on my surroundings. A bridesmaid's boyfriend spilled a drink and made a scene. Someone from the groom's side tripped over a speaker cord. And still, no one noticed the missing makeup from my bag. No one noticed me. At one point, I stepped out again, just long enough to fix my hem. When I returned, the hairbrush I kept in my coat pocket had vanished. That's when I stopped chalking it up to coincidence. It wasn't the first time things went missing around Vera. My first internship interview, the location mysteriously changed. She said it was a website error. My RSVP to a college friend's wedding never arrived, even though I swore I sent it. She laughed it off. Maybe it got lost in the mail. Back then, I believed her. I wanted to believe her. But now I knew better. "This isn't paranoia," I whispered to myself. "This is a pattern." I started mentally charting the timeline of the night. Who walked by my seat? Who lingered a second too long? Who Vera whispered to just before I noticed something gone? I wasn't imagining this. Vera wasn't sabotaging me out of impulse. She was orchestrating moments, tiny ones, enough to cut without bruising. The kind of damage that doesn't show up in pictures, and people always believe the pictures. I reached into my purse and pulled out a sticky note, something I kept for reminders, groceries, work deadlines. I wrote in sharp pen, "If I vanish, this table is the last place I was seen." I pressed the note under the seat, where no one would see it unless they looked for it, and no one ever looked for me. That was the point. That night, I didn't bother changing clothes. I collapsed onto my bed in the navy-wrap dress, the tag still poking my ribs, the smell of white wine still clinging to my sleeves. I lay there staring at the ceiling for hours, eyes wide open, but mind somewhere else, backtracking, reanalyzing, replaying everything I had ever brushed off. By 3 in the morning, my thoughts refused to quiet. I got up and opened the drawer where I kept old notebooks and university folders. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just chasing ghosts that suddenly felt real again. Buried beneath a manila envelope of tax forms was a brochure, worn, folded once across the middle, from a summer internship I had applied to during college. It was a tech firm in Seattle, prestigious, highly competitive. I'd made the shortlist and was scheduled for an in-person interview. I remember how excited I was, until I got there and the office was closed. They had moved locations, apparently. No one had told me. I'd printed the map the night before. Or, no. Vera had printed it for me. I was swamped with finals, and she'd offered sweetly, "Let me help, you're stressed." I thought she was being kind. Staring at that brochure now, my chest tightened. I flipped it over. Her handwriting, a smiley face on the corner. The kind she always doodled when she was hiding something. That's why the map didn't match. That's why I'd shown up to an empty office. She never wanted me to leave her shadow. The next morning, the fog hadn't lifted, but my phone buzzed with something that snapped me out of reflection and straight into rage. It was a message from Greg, Vera's fiancé. "I'd appreciate it if you stopped sending those texts. This is inappropriate." I blinked at the screen, confused. I hadn't messaged Greg in weeks, and even then, it was a thank you after he'd Venmo'd me for split brunch. Nothing flirtatious, nothing out of line. I texted back, "What texts?" A few minutes later, he sent screenshots, messages from my number, ones I had never written. "You looked good last night. Wish we'd met before her? I won't tell if you don't." Each message made my stomach churn. I clicked through, checking the layout. Something was off, fonts inconsistent, spacing strange. The timestamps didn't match my activity. I knew I didn't send them. But who would believe me? I forwarded the screenshots to Becca with a single line. "I need your eyes." It took her 6 minutes to reply. "Fake. Spoof app. Formatting's all wrong. She's not even being careful anymore." I didn't have to ask who she meant by she. Becca didn't say Vera's name unless she had to. She knew how much it hurt, even before I admitted it. "She's always been good at finding ways to protect her image," Becca added, and I could picture her shaking her head through the phone. "But this is criminal. Straight up." Criminal. The word stuck with me. I sat there at my kitchen counter, the morning light turning soft across the tile, and realized this wasn't about a wedding anymore. It wasn't about a dress or a name card, or even the table by the bathroom. It was about being erased, about my character being dismantled piece by piece while she smiled wide enough to hide the knife. I opened my voice recorder and hit record. "This is the moment," I said, voice calm, "where I learned that not everyone who claps for your growth wants you taller. Some want you trimmed, shorter, smaller, manageable." I paused, then saved the file, labeling it Family Archive. Next, I opened my laptop and created a new folder on the desktop. Vera, Proof. I wasn't planning on using it yet, but I wasn't about to keep playing defenseless. I uploaded the fake text screenshots, copied the audio memo, and added a few older receipts and messages that had once made me uneasy, but seemed harmless at the time. Then I backed it all up to the cloud. Twice. Becca texted again. "You okay?" I replied. "I'm not hiding anymore." And I meant it. I wasn't going to explode or lash out, not yet. But the quiet girl in the corner was gone. She had better things to do than disappear politely. I stared at the desktop folder for a long moment, my reflection faint in the black screen. I didn't open the file again. Not that morning. But it was there now, just in case. By the time the rehearsal brunch came around, I had already memorized every fake smile Vera ever wore. I could recite the tilt of her head when she lied, the squint of her eyes when she posed, the forced sweetness that coated every word meant to cut. I showed up that morning not to play nice, but to see how far she'd go if no one stopped her. The venue was sun-soaked and carefully curated. Rows of white-clothed tables lined the vineyard's patio, trimmed with eucalyptus and gold cutlery. Vera's aesthetic was always about performance, soothing, perfect, curated to convince. She was already seated when I arrived, surrounded by her court of bridesmaids. She avoided my gaze. My mother didn't. She was standing near the mimosa bar, eyes sharp despite the smile she offered the passing guests. As soon as I made my way toward the table, she pulled me aside like a manager handling an employee complaint. "Don't ruin this for your sister," she said, voice quiet but cutting. "She's worked too hard for today to be about you." I blinked. "I haven't done anything." She didn't even hesitate. "Exactly, that's your talent. Being a problem without lifting a finger." I tried to explain about the fake texts, how Vera had forged messages to frame me. I even pulled out my phone to show her the evidence, but she raised a hand, already done listening. "Even if she did it, you let her. You provoke her, you always have." That stung in a way that only truth twisted out of shape could. My mother didn't want a reality check. She wanted compliance. She wanted me to fold and vanish so Vera could shine unchallenged. I returned to the table without a word. Sat next to Becca, who was sipping water like it was vodka. Her eyes scanned my face, reading the tension. "What did she say?" she whispered. "Same thing she always says," I replied. "Make myself small." The brunch began in earnest. Toasts, speeches, laughter forced into harmony. I picked at a fruit tart, wondering how much longer I could keep this mask on. Midway through the meal, one of Vera's bridesmaids raised her glass and tapped it with a fork. "To Vera," she said brightly, "for making it to the finish line with grace, class, and a sister who—" She turned to me with a grin. "Well, let's just say the stylist can still fix whatever happened there." Laughter followed, loud and intentional. I froze for a second. Just one. Then I lifted my glass too, smiled as if I hadn't heard a thing, and clinked it gently against Becca's. "They want me to break," I said under my breath. "But I'm not giving them that." Becca's jaw tensed. "I'll handle her." "No," I said. "I need them to think they're still winning." Later, I excused myself and headed to the restroom. Not to cry, but to breathe. I stared at myself in the mirror, my hair freshly trimmed from the night before, face pale but composed. Sometimes a woman becomes dangerous the moment she stops defending herself and starts documenting. I splashed water on my face, dried it with a paper towel, and opened my phone. I typed a simple message and saved it as a draft. 12 hours, then the curtain drops. On my way back to the table, I passed the glass wall of the bridal suite. Vera stood inside, adjusting her earring in the mirror. Her posture was perfect, her gown fitted just right. But what caught my eye wasn't the dress, it was her reflection. She was practicing. That same bride smile she'd been rehearsing since she was 16. Polished, unbothered, radiant. Let her have her stage. I brought my own spotlight. Back at the table, I sat down without a sound, placed my mimosa to the side, and set my phone down face up. The screen glowed with the photo I'd left open, the screenshot of the fake text thread she'd created in my name. If someone looked close enough, they'd see it. But no one at that table ever looked close. I drove back to my parents' house that evening without turning on the radio. The silence in the car felt safer than music, less likely to trick me into remembering. The sun was already dropping behind the hills, throwing long shadows over the road. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch lights were already on, flickering slightly, like they couldn't decide if they were supposed to welcome or warn. My suitcase was sitting at the threshold, not inside, just leaning there like an afterthought, or maybe a test. Inside, the house smelled of lemon cleaner, and something faintly sweet. Too sweet. Vera's perfume always came before her, like her reputation. I heard her upstairs, humming. Her door clicked shut before I could make it past the foyer. I dropped my bag near the coat rack, slipped off my shoes, and made my way to the guest room. My old room that used to be mine before it was repainted and repurposed for visitors. A soft knock came 10 minutes later. Vera's voice. "Hey, I brought you something." When I opened the door, she stood there with a porcelain mug in both hands. Her smile didn't touch her eyes. "You must be exhausted," she said, nudging the cup toward me. "This'll help you sleep." I hesitated. The tea was steaming. Chamomile, my childhood favorite. "Thanks," I said, though the word felt foreign in my mouth. She lingered just long enough to confirm I took a sip before retreating down the hall. The tea was warm. Too warm, and something underneath the flavor felt flat, metallic. I set the cup on the nightstand and lay down on the bed, still fully dressed. Within minutes, my limbs felt heavy, like sandbags. My eyelids pulled themselves shut, though I wasn't ready. Not even close. Somewhere between awake and gone, I registered footsteps. Quiet. Too quiet. Then a whisper. Then a pull near my neck. I wanted to move, scream, stand. But my body was thick with fog. The only part of me that stirred was my breath, shallow and short. And then, snip. I don't remember sleeping. Just a blank space, followed by light leaking through blinds and the weight of something wrong. My neck was cold. Downstairs, voices moved like muffled music. I pulled myself out of bed slowly, the room spinning for a second longer than it should have. My head felt lighter. I went to the mirror and stopped. My hair. It was uneven, not just messy, but butchered. Long strands missing, chunks hacked out like someone had done it in the dark, or worse, without care. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at myself like I was trying to locate someone missing. I dressed, then went downstairs. In the living room, the fireplace mantel held a row of family photos. One in particular caught my eye. A framed print from when Vera and I were 10 and 12, matching dresses, matching shoes. But as I moved closer, I noticed something was off. I was missing, literally. Half the frame had been trimmed, cut down to show only Vera, beaming in her sundress, holding an ice cream cone. My shoulder remained in the corner, blurred, as if I'd been an accidental bystander in my own life. I picked it up, turned to my mother, who was buttering toast in the kitchen. "Wasn't I in this photo too?" She glanced over without missing a beat. "It didn't frame well. Vera's smile was perfect in this one." That wasn't the first time she had edited me out of a memory, but this time the proof was in her hand. I placed the photo back exactly where I'd found it, wiped the smudge from the glass, and returned upstairs. In my room, I texted Becca, "If I don't text by 9 a.m., call me." Loudly, no emojis, no smiley faces. I opened the closet. My coat was still hanging, but the pocket felt lighter. The hairbrush I always kept inside it, gone. By morning, the light filtering through the curtains didn't feel warm. It felt clinical, like a spotlight exposing what was left of me. My body ached like I'd slept in a position that hadn't been mine. I sat up slowly, trying to shake off the fog clinging to my limbs. It wasn't until I ran a hand through my hair that I knew something was wrong. My fingers caught on jagged strands. I stumbled into the bathroom, flicked on the light, and froze. The woman staring back at me wasn't a stranger. She was me, violated. My hair was uneven, hacked in places so severely that chunks of scalp peeked through. One side still hung down past my chin, the other ended just below my ear. It wasn't a haircut, it was a warning. I pressed my palm to the counter to steady myself. My breath stayed shallow, measured. Behind the door, I heard footsteps. A knock, light but deliberate. "You okay in there?" Vera's voice, fake casual. I met my own eyes in the mirror before answering. "You always were better with scissors than apologies." Silence. A full 5 seconds passed before she walked away. No defense, no denial, just distance. I sat on the cold tile floor, my knees pulled to my chest, head bowed, not out of defeat, but calculation. The world narrowed to a pinpoint of memory. Weeks ago, I'd bought a nanny cam on impulse. Something about the way things kept shifting around me, my purse unzipped, texts rewritten, glances exchanged, told me to stop trusting perception alone. I had tucked it inside the drawer beside the bed, disguised in a USB charger. I crawled over now, pulled it out, and took it to my laptop. The footage loaded in silence. I clicked through the files, timestamps flying by, until I hit 2:13 a.m. The screen flickered. Vera entered my room. She wore latex gloves. In one hand, scissors. In the other, nothing but arrogance. She moved toward me in the bed, whispered softly, "Let's take the attention out of the picture." Her hand reached down, fingers slipping through my hair. The first snip was slow, deliberate, not rushed or frantic. She worked in silence, like someone arranging flowers. Before leaving, she placed a folded note on the nightstand. My camera caught it from the side. Smile less. Speak less. Show less. I didn't feel tears. I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity. Pure, unfiltered clarity. This wasn't about jealousy or wedding nerves. This was erasure. And the worst part? No one else in that house would have stopped her, even if they'd known. They didn't just look away. They'd handed her the scissors. I watched the clip again, slower. Not to relive it, but to commit it to memory. Then I uploaded the footage to a hidden cloud account I'd set up months ago. I forwarded the video to Becca with a single line, "I'm ready." Then I stood up, walked to the bathroom, picked up the same pair of scissors Vera had used, still resting neatly on the vanity as if daring me to respond. I stared into the mirror one more time. Then, carefully, I evened out the mess, cut off the last long pieces, crafted a blunt, no-nonsense bob that framed my face like armor. The girl they'd always underestimated wasn't coming back, and the woman standing in her place wasn't asking for permission. I looked at the mirror, not at the damage, but at what remained. Let's make sure they never forget what they tried to erase. I left the bathroom, pulled on a dark jacket, and grabbed my phone. Michelle was no longer the bridesmaid, not the background, not the afterthought. She was the storm no one invited. By the time I reached the venue, the air smelled like champagne and tension. Not the good kind, the kind that clings to your skin like humidity and leaves people whispering before anything even happens. The vineyard lawn was filled with white chairs, blush linens, and too many people pretending too hard. Vera had curated the space like she curated everything else in her life. Flawless on the surface, dangerous underneath. I walked through the gates wearing a fitted black silk blouse, sleeves rolled up just enough to say I didn't come here to serve. My hair was freshly cut, sharp, intentional. Not a correction, an announcement. As I stepped closer to the bridal lounge, I caught the tail end of a conversation near the sound booth. A bridesmaid leaned toward another, smirking. "Did you see what she texted Greg?" she whispered. "Ballsy." They didn't see me, or maybe they did. Didn't matter. I approached the tech table. The assistant glanced up from the screen and fumbled, accidentally knocking over a printed sheet. My name was typed at the top. I picked it up before he could. It was a screenshot, my number, my name. But the message wasn't mine. Flirtatious, borderline desperate, spliced together with texts I had never sent. I knew the tone, knew the pattern. Vera had gotten lazy, sloppy. Or maybe she thought no one would ever check. She was half right. Behind me, I heard her voice slide across the floor like ice. "Maybe don't give them ammunition next time." I turned around slowly. "I didn't give them anything," I said. "You just know how to plant it." Her smile faltered for half a second, then reset. "You sure you want to do this here?" she asked. "It's my wedding day." "No, Vera," I replied. "It's the day everyone finds out what your love looks like when no one's watching." Before she could answer, a staff member approached me. "Miss Michelle, the speech your sister approved, it's here." He handed me a folded sheet of paper, crisp and typed. I unfolded it. My name was at the top, again. But the words weren't mine. Lines about how beautiful Vera had always been. How proud I was to stand beside her. It sounded like it had been written by a PR intern with no soul. And then, near the bottom, we all have our parts to play, even the quiet ones who try too hard. I let out a breath, folded the page again. Becca appeared behind me, sharp-eyed and silent. She's trying to make you read your own obituary, she said low. Publicly, with a toast. She forgot I still have a voice, I replied. I stepped away from them both and entered the restroom, locked the door. My reflection stared back at me, composed, calm, and coiled. I opened my phone and hit record. My name is Michelle, I began. You're going to hear words from me today, but not the ones Vera handed me, not the ones her team formatted or her bridesmaids rehearsed. You'll hear mine, and if you don't, well, that means someone cut the mic. And if they cut the mic, I looked directly into the camera, then you'll hear the truth anyway. I stopped the recording, attached it in a message to Becca. If they cut the mic, I typed, you hit send. Back at the bridal lounge, I walked toward the back of the crowd. People were filing in, clinking glasses, fanning themselves under white parasols. Vera posed by the fountain, her train draped like royalty. Cameras followed her like heat-seeking missiles. She didn't look at me as I passed, but I leaned close anyway. Smile wide, I said. It's your last moment unexposed. I reached the front stage. The MC called my name. As I stepped up, someone handed me 2 sheets, mine and the one Vera had approved. I held them both. Then I looked at the crowd, lifted the sheets, and let one slip from my hand. Let them wonder which one I kept. Some stories are whispered, some are screamed. Mine? It started with a playback. I stood at the mic, wedding script in one hand, the other resting at my side. The crowd quieted. Rows of familiar faces turned toward me, smiles expectant. They were waiting for the hallmark speech. A sister's tearful blessing. A performative gesture of unity. I gave them 2 lines. Then I paused. This isn't mine, I said, letting the page fall to the ground like an empty envelope. A few heads tilted. One cousin blinked as if trying to read my tone. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Unlocked it. Connected it to the venue's Bluetooth speaker, already primed. Becca had helped me test it that morning, just in case. From the bridal table, Vera stood up slightly. Her smile faltered. What are you doing? She mouthed across the distance. I didn't flinch. Let's talk about the kind of silence that leaves scars, I said, loud enough for the vineyard air to catch it. And then I pressed play. At first, there was only the rustling of static. Then, Vera's voice, clear as glass. Let's take the attention out of the picture. The crowd stiffened. A few guests glanced around, confused. But the audio kept playing, the sound of scissors slicing, the whisper of fabric brushing hair. Vera breathing lightly, almost methodically. She always had too much attention, her voice said. We'll fix that. Gasps broke across the rows like a windstorm. One woman covered her mouth. A man shook his head slowly, muttering, No damn way. Greg, the groom, stood from his seat, face pale. His eyes didn't leave Vera. The video ended with a soft click. Silence blanketed the space like fog. I stepped back from the mic and looked across the crowd. You were invited here to witness a wedding, I said evenly. Instead, I brought you the truth. I didn't wait for applause. Didn't need it. I stepped down and walked off the stage, the gravel crunching beneath my heels. Behind me, the world fractured. Voices rose, some shocked, some angry, others confused, afraid of saying the wrong thing, of aligning with the wrong side. That was always the danger with truth. It drew a line in a room full of people who thought they were neutral. Greg turned toward Vera. His voice wasn't loud, but everyone heard it. You did that to your own sister? Vera didn't respond. She stood frozen, a perfectly constructed statue, flawless, motionless, cracked at the center. Their mother tried to recover the moment. "We all make mistakes," she said, voice brittle. "It's a misunderstanding." But no one was listening. Some guests put down their drinks. A few walked away. The music that had played gently in the background had stopped without anyone noticing. Meanwhile, I slipped through the crowd and ducked behind the tent, heart steady. My hands didn't shake. My mouth wasn't dry. Backstage, Becca stood waiting. She met my eyes, phone already in hand. "You sure?" she asked. I nodded. "Let it go." She hit upload. The video, the same one they'd just heard, went live on every platform. The caption simple: "When your sister uses scissors instead of words, and you finally speak back." In under a minute, my inbox buzzed. Comments, reposts, a DM from someone I hadn't spoken to since high school. "Thank you for saying it, for all of us who never could." I stepped out from behind the tent. The sunlight had shifted. The air smelled different now, less like roses, more like air after lightning. Guests still murmured. Vera was gone from the table. Greg wasn't. And when I walked past him toward the gate, he said just one thing. "I wish I'd known sooner." I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I exited the venue to silence. Not shame, peace. I didn't cry when I lost my place in the family. I cried when I realized I never had one to begin with. I sat on a bench just beyond the main tent, far enough to no longer hear the cluster of polite murmurs or feel the sting of judgment in half glances. My hands rested in my lap, palms open like I had been preparing to catch something, grief maybe, or maybe relief. The sun was no longer high. The shadows had started to lean across the grass, long and soft. Greg stepped into view slowly, not with purpose, but with the hesitation of someone realizing the foundation beneath him had already cracked. He wasn't holding his jacket anymore. It hung over one arm, limp and wrinkled, as though it too had given up. He didn't say Vera's name, didn't ask where she went. Instead, he walked down the aisle, not toward anyone, but away from the altar entirely. Guests moved aside instinctively. No music played. Just footsteps on gravel and the sound of someone finally choosing a different story. He passed me without stopping, then turned back halfway. His eyes weren't accusing, just tired. "I don't know what kind of man I would have been if I had ignored this," he said. I didn't move. "Thank you," he added, "for showing me." I didn't speak, just nodded once, small, deliberate, and watched as he got into his car and drove off. The sound of tires on dirt, more honest than anything that had come from the ceremony microphone. Inside, the aftermath had begun. Vera was still in her gown, train gathered under her arms, like she wasn't sure if she wanted to run or be carried. She hadn't cried. That would have required surrender. My mother stood beside her, red-faced and trembling. "You just had to ruin everything, didn't you?" she snapped when she saw me through the tent. My father tried to calm the guests. Most ignored him. A few of my aunts kept their eyes low. One uncle took a sip of his drink and muttered, "Jesus, I thought this was going to be a wedding, not a reckoning." Becca appeared at my side again, her hand wrapping firmly around my wrist. "We're done here," she said, voice steady. "You did what you came to do." We walked together past the catering staff, cleaning up hors d'oeuvres nobody touched. As we approached the exit, one of Vera's bridesmaids gave a slow, sardonic clap. I didn't turn. I didn't need her applause. Becca and I made it to the parking lot. She unlocked the car, and we climbed in without saying anything. The air inside was still cool, and it smelled like peppermint gum and hand sanitizer. "I'm not sure if I feel better," I said, buckling my seatbelt. "You weren't supposed to," Becca replied. "You were supposed to be heard." We sat there for a moment, letting the engine idle. "Then why does it still feel like grief?" I whispered. Becca didn't answer right away. She just looked out the windshield, tapping her thumb gently against the steering wheel. "Because what they took from you wasn't just a seat at a table," she finally said. "It was the illusion that they'd ever pull out a chair." We drove in silence, not because there was nothing to say, but because sometimes words ruin the moment. By the time we pulled into Becca's driveway, her phone had exploded with alerts. A video post, hundreds of comments, thousands of views. The clip had traveled far, across phones, timelines, text threads. A wildfire started not by a match, but by a boundary finally drawn. Becca scrolled through the top comments aloud. "This is what trauma in a nice dress looks like. God, I wish I had her strength when my mom sided with my brother's wife over me. I needed this more than I can explain." I stared out her passenger window, letting it wash over me. The world had seen me. Maybe not everyone believed me, but enough did. Enough to make silence an option I no longer owed anyone. As she shut off the car, Becca looked over. "So," she said, "what now?" I reached for the door handle, ready to step out of the car, and into something unknown but finally mine. The car door shut behind me with a finality I hadn't expected. Becca headed inside to grab us some water. I stood on her porch for a minute longer, letting the cool air settle on my skin. Then I remembered. I needed to pick up my things from the house. I drove alone, the streets unusually empty for a Saturday. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway, the sun had dipped enough to stretch long shadows across the lawn. The porch light was already on, flickering in that same broken rhythm it had for years. My key, as always, was clipped to my lanyard. But when I inserted it into the lock, it stopped halfway. It no longer turned. At first, I thought maybe I was using the wrong key. I tried again, more forcefully. Nothing. Then I knocked. Once, twice. Footsteps approached, slow and reluctant. The door cracked open, just far enough to see my mother's eyes. Cold. Calculated. "You had a choice," she said, no preamble. "You chose humiliation. You chose exile." I exhaled through my nose, not breaking eye contact. "No," I said quietly. "I chose truth." Without a word, she disappeared behind the door, only to return seconds later with a small cardboard box. She handed it through the crack. Inside, a few hairpins, a half-used bottle of perfume, and a pair of earrings from high school graduation. Nothing valuable, nothing personal, nothing she'd want back. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't even shut the door. She let it close itself behind her. I stood there for a moment longer, staring at the chipped paint around the doorknob. I could have knocked again, could have demanded answers, could have shouted everything I didn't get to say, but instead, I turned, walked back to my car, each step heavier than the last. I didn't cry. Not yet. My grief sat inside my throat like something unfinished. I called Becca on the way. "I think I've just been orphaned," I told her, "while my parents are still alive." She paused before answering. "That means you're free," she said gently. "That also means you get to decide who counts as family now." I stopped at a gas station on the edge of town to fill up. I hadn't realized how low the tank was. I stepped inside to grab a bottle of water. The cashier glanced up but said nothing. Then, as I turned to leave, someone tapped my shoulder. "Hey," a woman said, maybe late 30s, in a tan catering uniform. Her name tag read Janet. "I saw you," she said, voice quiet. I tilted my head. "I'm sorry?" "The video," she clarified. "I was on staff at the wedding." My stomach tensed. "We whisper about our families all our lives," she added. "You screamed, and I admire that." I didn't know what to say. No one had ever described what I did as brave. Not in real time. Not without strings attached. "Thank you," I managed. She nodded and walked past me, disappearing down the snack aisle like it had been nothing. Like she hadn't just given me more validation than my entire family ever had. I sat in my car for 5 minutes before starting the engine again, bottle of water untouched beside me. When I got back to Becca's place, she was already in the kitchen, slicing strawberries for something that resembled a coping mechanism. The lights were soft, the windows open, I placed the box my mother had given me on the counter. "This isn't home," I said quietly. Becca didn't look up. "It doesn't need to be yet," she replied. "It just needs to be safe." We didn't hug. We didn't toast. We just existed in the same room, the kind of presence I'd craved for years. Later that night, I opened the box to finally see what had been tossed in. Tucked beneath the earrings and old perfume was a folded piece of notebook paper. No name, no greeting, just one sentence, scribbled in handwriting I hadn't seen in a long time. "Some things can't be fixed. Doesn't mean they weren't real." I read it twice, then folded it back and placed it at the bottom of the box, under everything else. Because even if it had come from my father, it had come too late. And maybe real was enough. For now. But real wasn't the end. Just the fracture before the rebuild. 1 week later, I found myself seated in a tiny podcast studio off a side street in Portland. Exposed brick, a flickering neon sign in the hallway that read, "Talk louder," and a woman named Dana, who looked at me like she didn't need to know the whole story to know I had one. Dana was a therapist by trade. She didn't ask if I was ready. She simply slid the mic closer and said, "Whenever you feel grounded." The red light came on. I cleared my throat. "People keep calling me brave," I said slowly, "but I didn't do any of this to be brave." Dana leaned in. "Then why did you?" I looked at her, at the mic, at nothing. "Because when someone cuts you," I said, "and the world applauds them for holding the scissors, what do you do?" Silence. "You bleed on your own terms," Dana whispered. I told her everything, not as a survivor, not as a martyr, but as a witness. I told her about the scissors, the tea, the name card that never had my name. I told her about the photo, the fake text, the script I refused to read. And I told her the one truth I hadn't admitted to anyone. "I wasn't afraid of losing my family," I said. "I was afraid of realizing they never chose me in the first place." She didn't offer pity. She just nodded. And I breathed a little easier. After the taping, I walked to a cafe a few blocks down. I hadn't eaten. I ordered a scone I wouldn't finish, and a coffee I didn't need. While waiting for my drink, a woman approached. Mid-50s maybe, eyes soft but focused. "I listened," she said gently. "This morning, on the way to work." I didn't know what to say. "My daughter's going through something like that," she continued, "and I haven't known how to show up, but I want to be better." I felt something catch in my chest. "You already are," I told her, "because you're here." She didn't hug me, didn't offer contact, just nodded and walked away. And that was enough. That night, I checked my email. Among the noise, press inquiries, podcast offers, messages from strangers, I saw one from my mother. Subject line: "Family heals, right?" No greeting, no name, no apology, just that. I stared at it for a while, then clicked archive. Healing isn't the same as reunion, and I didn't owe her one. Later, Becca and I sat on her couch, legs crossed, snacks between us. She scrolled through the podcast's comment section, reading the ones that stopped her. She gave words to what I've only whispered in my head. "My sister did the same thing, and my mom told me to stay quiet." I thought I was alone. "You didn't just speak," Becca said, setting down her phone. "You gave others permission to." I shook my head slightly. "I didn't know silence could be contagious," she smiled. "Or rebellion." We didn't need to talk more than that. The next morning, I took a walk alone. I passed a family in the park, mid-photo session, parents wrangling toddlers. The youngest, a girl maybe 6, stood off to the side, watching me. She smiled, shy and warm. I smiled back. She didn't need to know why, and I didn't need to explain. Because sometimes connection doesn't come from blood. Sometimes it comes from being seen. Some people build bridges, others walk away. And sometimes the right choice is to burn the map altogether. 2 weeks after the wedding, I stood alone at the entrance of a small art gallery downtown. The sign outside read, Unseen Women, a community storytelling exhibit. Inside, the air was cool and the lights were soft. No press, no fanfare. Just quiet reverence and walls lined with photographs of women. Some candid, some staged, all honest. Mine was the last in the final room, a black and white portrait. I wasn't posing, just staring directly at the camera. Hair blunt, shoulders squared, eyes steady. There was no caption, no name, no context, and that was exactly how I wanted it. I stood by the photo for a while, arms folded, watching how people paused. Some looked confused, some intrigued, but they looked. And that, I realized, was the point. A little girl walked in holding her grandmother's hand. She let go and wandered over, stopping in front of my portrait. "She looks strong," she said, pointing at me. Then she turned to me, because I hadn't moved, and asked, "But, did she get better, or did she just get away?" It took everything in me not to cry. I crouched down beside her, met her wide eyes, and said, "Sometimes both." She nodded like that made perfect sense, and went to catch up with her grandmother. My eyes burned, not with grief, but with something quieter, like reverence for that kind of clarity. Kids don't need metaphors. They ask the questions grown-ups are too careful to voice. That night, back at my apartment, I unpacked the last box. Most of it was books, some old notebooks, and one frame I'd wrapped in a sweatshirt to keep safe. I peeled the fabric back and stared at it for a moment. It was a photo of me at 8 years old. Messy hair, gap-toothed smile, eyes that hadn't yet learned to shrink. I didn't cry. I hung it by the front door. Not in a hallway, not tucked in a corner, front and center. "You made it," I whispered, not to the world, but to her. To me. A message from Becca pinged on my phone just as I stepped back from the wall. "Your clip is now being studied in a college ethics class," I replied. "Funny, I never studied how to be ethical. I just stopped lying to myself." We made plans to meet for dinner. Nothing fancy, just takeout and some kind of lemon dessert we hadn't tried yet. Celebration didn't have to be loud. It just had to be honest. Later that evening, I sat on the couch and opened my journal. "I used to wait for people to see me," I wrote. "Now, I don't care who blinks. I built the mirror myself." I closed the book and walked to the window. Outside, a woman passed by. She glanced up, eyes catching the glow from inside. She didn't wave, just noticed. And that was enough. Because you don't need to be seen by everyone, just by the right ones. I walked to the door, turned the deadbolt slowly, and locked it from the inside. Then I whispered into the quiet. "They cut me once, but I grew where they didn't look."